Number 1. David Joseph Pitman. In the late 1980s, a violent family feud in Florida ended with 3 people dead and 1 man sentenced to die. His name was David Joseph Pitman, and his story began with anger, jealousy, and revenge. Pitman was married to Marie Knowles Piggin, but their marriage was falling apart. By 1989, Marie had filed for divorce, something Pitman couldn't accept. He made repeated threats, saying he would hurt Marie and her family if she left him. The situation became worse when he learned that Bonnie Knowles, Marie's sister, had accused him of raping her years earlier in 1985. Though the charge couldn't move forward because the statute of limitations had expired, Pitman's hatred toward the Knowles family exploded. On the night of May 15, 1990, Pitman decided to act. He first cut the phone line outside the Knowles family home so no one could call for help. He then tapped on Bonnie's bedroom window. When she let him in, thinking he wanted to talk, he tried to force himself on her. When she refused, he snapped. Bonnie screamed, and Pitman attacked her, stabbing her and slitting her throat to silence her cries. Hearing the screams, Barbara Knowles, Bonnie's mother, rushed from her room, but Pitman stabbed her too. Moments later, Clarence Knowles, the father, tried to call the police, but Pitman grabbed him in the hallway and stabbed him repeatedly. Within minutes, 3 members of the same family lay dead. To cover his tracks, Pitman poured gasoline around the house, placed a tire under Bonnie's bed to fuel the fire, and set the home ablaze. Before leaving, he stole the keys to Bonnie's brown Toyota, drove it away, and watched from his own tow truck as firefighters and police discovered the burning vehicle hours later. But Pitman wasn't clever enough to escape suspicion. Several witnesses saw a tow truck near the scene, and one woman described a man fleeing from the burning car, a man who looked like Pitman. When police began investigating, all evidence pointed directly to him. Feeling cornered, Pitman turned himself in the next day, claiming innocence. His trial began in 1991, and the evidence was overwhelming. The threats, the matching vehicle, and the witness testimony. After just 4 days of deliberation, the jury convicted him on 3 counts of first-degree murder, arson, and grand theft. He was sentenced to death. During the sentencing, the prosecution described the murders as cold and deliberate. They reminded the court that Pitman had threatened the family for months. His defense tried to argue that Pitman had a low IQ and a troubled childhood, but it didn't matter. The brutality of the crime left no room for mercy. For more than 3 decades, Pitman remained on Florida's death row, filing appeal after appeal, claiming misconduct, mental disability, and unfair trial procedures. Each one failed. By 2025, he was 63 years old, one of Florida's longest-serving death row inmates. On September 16, 2025, the U.S. Supreme Court rejected his final appeal. That same day, Governor Ron DeSantis signed his death warrant, his 12th since taking office, setting a record for Florida governors. Pitman's execution was scheduled for September 17, 2025, at Florida State Prison in Stark. His final meal was traditional Southern comfort food: fried chicken, steak, biscuits, chocolate, and soda. At 6 p.m., Pitman was escorted into the execution chamber. The lethal injection used 3 drugs: a sedative, a paralytic, and potassium chloride to stop the heart. Witnesses said he took deep breaths for about 90 seconds before his body went still. At 6:12 p.m., he was pronounced dead. Before the procedure began, Pitman leaned toward the microphone and spoke his last words. "I know all of you came here to watch an innocent man be killed by the state of Florida. I am innocent. I didn't kill anyone. That's all." His ex-wife Marie, who was also the daughter and sister of the victims, was present among the witnesses. She watched silently as the man who destroyed her family took his final breath. Pitman became the 12th person executed in Florida in 2025 and the first that September. For the families involved, it marked the end of a 34-year nightmare, and for the state, another reminder that time may dull memory, but it never erases justice. Number 2. Blaine Milam. In December 2008, one of the most disturbing crimes in Texas history took place inside a small trailer home in Rusk County. It involved an 18-year-old man named Blaine Milam, his girlfriend Jessica Carson, and Jessica's 13-month-old baby girl, Amora Bain Carson. What happened inside that trailer shocked even seasoned investigators, a brutal act of violence so senseless that it became one of the darkest cases ever tried in the state. On the morning of December 2, 2008, at around 10:30 a.m., Milam called 911. His voice was shaky as he told the operator, "My daughter, I just found her dead." When asked how old the child was, he answered, 13 months.
December 2, 2008, 16 hours, 48 minutes, 15 seconds.
Rescue 911.
Yes. My name's Blaine Milam, and my daughter, I just found her dead.
How old's your daughter?
13 months.
13 months old? Okay, let me connect you with the ambulance service, okay?
But what rescuers found when they arrived was not the scene of an accident. It was a scene of unimaginable cruelty. At first, Milam and Jessica Carson gave several confusing stories. They said they had left the baby alone and returned to find her injured. Then they claimed she had eaten insulation from the wall. Later, they told police they had tried to perform an exorcism because they believed the child was possessed by a demon. The more they spoke, the stranger it became. Investigators quickly saw signs that the child had been tortured for hours. Evidence at the scene included blood-stained bedding, diapers, wipes, and clothes. The medical examiner later confirmed that Amora's injuries covered nearly every part of her body: multiple skull fractures, broken arms, legs, and ribs, as well as at least 24 human bite marks. It was clear she had suffered terribly before dying. Inside the trailer, police found a hammer with traces of blood, a tube of personal lubricant, and Milam's genes stained with the child's DNA. Forensic analysis proved beyond doubt that Blaine Milam had been directly involved in the attack. The medical examiner who performed the autopsy called it the most brutal case I have ever seen. When questioned further, Jessica Carson eventually told investigators that Milam believed Amora was possessed. He claimed that God was tired of her lies and that the demon inside the baby had to be beaten out. Prosecutors later said Amora's final hours lasted more than 30 hours, a nightmare of torture at the hands of the two adults who should have protected her. The evidence was overwhelming: blood spatter on the walls, human bite marks that matched Milam's teeth, and a confession he made to a nurse after his arrest. Investigators also discovered that Milam's sister had tried to hide evidence for him. Under his instruction, she went to his trailer to remove a bag hidden beneath the floor. Inside, police found a pipe key with traces of the same lubricant used in the assault, proof that nothing about this crime was accidental or impulsive. The case spread across Texas, drawing national attention for its shocking brutality. Because of public outrage, the trial was moved over 100 miles south to Montgomery County to ensure fairness. Milam and Carson were tried separately. In June 2010, when he was only 20 years old, Blaine Keith Milam was found guilty of capital murder. The jury needed only a few hours to reach its decision. The details of the child's suffering were too much to ignore. Jessica Carson, the baby's mother, was convicted later and sentenced to life in prison without parole. Milam's defense argued that he was intellectually disabled, saying he had a low IQ, limited education, and could not read or write well. They claimed he didn't fully understand what he was doing, but the jury rejected that argument. The court noted that Milam had made plans, tried to hide evidence, and lied to police, actions that showed awareness of guilt. He was sentenced to death. Over the next 15 years, Milam remained on Texas death row, filing one appeal after another. His lawyers repeated the claim of intellectual disability, but every court, from the Texas Court of Criminal Appeals to the U.S. Supreme Court, refused to overturn the sentence. In 2019 and 2021, he received temporary stays of execution, but both were later lifted. Finally, on September 25, 2025, at the Huntsville unit in Texas, Blaine Milam's time ran out. He was 27 years old when he was executed by lethal injection. The state allowed him a final meal, rare for Texas, which included a cheeseburger, baked fries, green beans, pinto beans, scrambled eggs with gravy, cookies, and tea. As he lay strapped to the gurney, Milam was asked if he had any last words. He nodded and said, "If any of you wish to see me again, I implore you, accept Jesus Christ as your Lord and Savior, and we'll meet again. I love you all. Take me home, Jesus." Moments later, the chemicals flowed into his veins. Witnesses said his body tensed, and he struggled briefly before falling still. At 6:45 p.m., the warden pronounced him dead. The murder of baby Amora Carson remains one of the most disturbing crimes Texas has ever recorded. Even years later, many who worked the case say they still can't forget what they saw. For them, justice came slowly, but it came.
She was a great little girl. She
She was beautiful. She was beautiful. Wasn't walking yet, but she was beautiful. Her first words were "Daddy."
And you were not even the biological father, but you were daddy for her.
Yes, sir.
That was the first thing she ever said.
Yes, sir.
Can you still see her face when she said that?
Yes, sir. I miss her. There ain't nothing I can do.
And you loved her.
I did. I loved her and Jessica.
That was a joke. Look at Mom.
Number 3. Jeffrey Todd West. On the night of March 27, 1997, a small gas station in Alabama became the scene of a cold and calculated murder, one that would take nearly 3 decades to reach its final end. The killer was Jeffrey Todd West, a 21-year-old man whose greed and violence led to the death of a hard-working mother of 2. It was a robbery that ended in blood and eventually in his own execution. West knew the gas station well. He had once worked there himself at the Herald Chevron station in Etowah County. He was familiar with its layout, the cash drawer, and the habits of the people who worked there. By 1997, he had fallen into trouble, living without steady work and searching for fast money. That March night, he decided to return to his old workplace, not as an employee, but as a robber. At around 11:30 p.m., West entered the station with his 17-year-old girlfriend, Amy Pierce. Working behind the counter that night was Margaret Margie Berry, a 33-year-old mother trying to support her family. She had only been at the job for a few days. West carried a .45 caliber pistol and told Berry to hand over the money. She opened the register and gave him about $250, which was kept in a cookie tin behind the counter. But West never planned to let her live. After taking the money, he forced Berry to lie face down on the floor. Then, without hesitation, he shot her once in the back of the head. The bullet killed her instantly. Her body was found hours later by a co-worker opening the store for the morning shift. The police launched an immediate investigation. At first, there were few clues, no camera footage, and the small town had been quiet that night. But one co-worker, Donna Mitchell, told detectives that she had seen West and another man at the station a day or 2 before the robbery. That tip gave investigators their first lead. Within days, they discovered that West's girlfriend, Amy Pierce, knew key details about the murder. Under questioning, she broke down. She admitted that she had been with West that night and had waited in the car during the shooting. In exchange for testifying against him, Pierce agreed to a 35-year prison sentence instead of facing the death penalty herself. Prosecutors later presented her testimony along with letters West had sent her from jail. Some of the letters were heavily edited by Pierce, but forensic experts were able to recover the original words. And inside them, West had written details about the robbery and his plans to leave no witnesses. Those letters sealed his fate. West's trial began on June 1, 1999, in the Etowah County Circuit Court. The courtroom was tense. The victim's family filled the benches, and West, dressed in a prison jumpsuit, showed little emotion. The prosecution described him as cold and unfeeling, a man who executed a defenseless woman for less than $300. They showed the jury pictures of the gas station, the blood-stained floor, and the bullet wound to Berry's head. The jury deliberated for only a short time before finding West guilty of capital murder during a robbery. The same jury voted 10-2 in favor of the death penalty. On July 7, 1999, Judge William Cardwell confirmed the sentence. He said it was one of the hardest decisions he had ever made, but the brutality and planning behind the murder left him no other choice. For the next 26 years, West lived on Alabama's death row, appealing his case in both state and federal courts. During those years, he gave a few interviews, often expressing regret for what he had done. He said, "Not a day goes by that I don't wish I could change what I did. I wish I could switch places with her." In 2018, Alabama introduced a new rule allowing death row inmates to choose between lethal injection and nitrogen hypoxia, a method that replaces oxygen with pure nitrogen. When given the choice, West selected nitrogen, believing it would be a quicker and less painful death. But when the state first used that method in 2024 on another inmate, witnesses reported the man gasped and shook violently for several minutes. Even so, West did not change his choice. As his execution date approached, the victim's son, Will Berry, publicly opposed it. He was only 11 when his mother was killed, but as an adult, he said he had found forgiveness through faith. He wrote to Governor Kay Ivey asking her to commute the sentence to life in prison, but the governor refused, citing Alabama's law on capital murder. On September 25, 2025, West's time ran out. He was 50 years old when guards led him into the execution chamber at the William C. Holman Correctional Facility in Atmore, Alabama. He had spent the morning visiting with 8 relatives and eating his final meal, chicken quesadillas, paid for with a $20 allowance. At 5:56 p.m., officials strapped him to the gurney, placed a blue-rimmed gas mask over his face, and began the flow of nitrogen. Witnesses said he gave a thumbs up to his attorney before his body began to shake. For 4 minutes, he struggled for breath, then slowly went still. At 6:22 p.m., he was pronounced dead. In his final written statement, West said he had been baptized earlier that year and that he was at peace because I know where I'm going. He also thanked the Berry family for forgiving him. After 26 years of appeals and waiting, the case of Jeffrey Todd West finally ended. For the family of Margaret Berry, it closed a painful chapter, one that began with a senseless act of greed and ended with justice decades later. Number 4. Victor Tony Jones. On the night of December 19, 1990, an act of greed and violence changed several lives forever in Miami-Dade, Florida. The man responsible was Victor Tony Jones, a 29-year-old with a troubled past and a long history of pain. What began as a plan for a quick robbery ended with 2 innocent people dead, and more than 3 decades later, Jones would face his own death in the same state where it all began. Victor Jones had lived a hard life. Born into poverty and abandoned by his mother at a young age, he grew up being shuffled between relatives in the state's care system. As a teenager, he was sent to the Florida School for Boys in Okeechobee, a reform school later exposed for widespread abuse. Victor was beaten, humiliated, and left with deep emotional scars. That past didn't excuse what he would later do, but it helped explain the darkness that shaped him. In 1990, Jones started working at Nestor Engineering, a small family-run business in the Wynwood neighborhood of Miami. It was owned by Jacob and Matilda Dolly Nestor, a kind elderly couple who were known for helping people down on their luck. Jacob, 67, was a World War II veteran and an inventor with several patents. Matilda, 66, was his devoted wife. They paid their workers fairly, often hiring people others wouldn't give a chance. Victor was one of them. He had started working there only a day before the killings, but instead of being grateful for the opportunity, Jones saw it as a target. Late that night, after everyone else had left, Victor returned to the building, hoping to steal cash and valuables. Inside, Jacob and Matilda were finishing up work for the day. The quiet couple had no idea that the man they had just hired would soon turn on them. According to investigators, Victor attacked Matilda first. When she went to the restroom at the back of the office, he followed her and stabbed her in the neck. The wound was fatal, severing her aorta and causing massive bleeding. Hearing her screams, Jacob rushed in to help his wife. Victor turned the knife on him and stabbed him in the chest, piercing his heart. But even as he collapsed, the war veteran refused to give up. He stumbled to his office, bleeding heavily, and reached for the small .22 caliber pistol he kept in a drawer. For nearly 25 minutes, Jacob fought for his life and his wife's. Witnesses later said it appeared he tried to defend her until his last breath. With what little strength he had left, Jacob fired 5 shots at Victor, one striking him in the forehead. Somehow, Victor survived the bullet wound. When police and paramedics arrived after a UPS driver discovered the bodies, they found Jacob and Matilda dead, and Victor lying nearby, conscious but gravely injured. At the crime scene, police found cash, credit cards, and personal belongings from both victims stuffed into Victor's pockets. The motive was clear: robbery. He was rushed to the hospital, where, according to a nurse's testimony, he confessed to killing the couple, claiming they owed him money. That excuse made little sense to investigators. The Nestors were known for generosity, not debt. Within hours, Victor Tony Jones was under arrest for 2 counts of first-degree murder and armed robbery. It took years for the case to reach trial. When it finally began in February 1993, prosecutors presented overwhelming evidence: Victor's confession, the stolen property, and the blood matching both victims. They described him as a man who had betrayed kindness with violence. The jury deliberated for only a short time before finding him guilty on all charges. During the sentencing, Victor's defense tried to introduce evidence of his childhood trauma and abuse at the reform school, arguing that it had left him emotionally broken. But in 1993, those claims didn't carry much weight in court. The jury voted 10-2 for the death penalty in Matilda's murder and unanimously for Jacob's. On March 1, 1993, the judge upheld the sentence, calling the murders cold, calculated, and heartless. Over the next 32 years, Victor filed appeal after appeal, claiming mental disability, brain damage from his childhood beatings, and emotional trauma from years of institutional abuse. None succeeded. In 2024, Florida formally acknowledged the abuse that had occurred at the school where Victor was raised. The state even deposited compensation money into his prison account. But while his suffering as a child was real, it did not erase the murders he had committed as an adult. On August 29, 2025, Governor Ron DeSantis signed Victor's death warrant, setting the execution for September 30, 2025. In the weeks before his death, Victor met with a spiritual advisor but received no visitors. His final meal was simple: fried chicken, collard greens, and sweet tea. That evening, at 6:13 p.m., inside Florida State Prison in Stark, Victor Tony Jones was strapped to the gurney. The 3-drug lethal injection began: a sedative, a paralytic, and potassium chloride to stop the heart. Witnesses described the execution as calm and uneventful. When asked for final words, Victor simply said, "No, sir." Among those watching was Irene Fisher, the Nestor's daughter, now in her 70s. After years of grief, she told reporters she had forgiven him. "I forgive him because it's the only way I can have peace," she said softly. At 6:18 p.m., Victor Jones was pronounced dead. His execution marked Florida's 13th of the year, the highest in decades. For more than 30 years, this case represented both tragedy and redemption, a story of kindness met with cruelty, and of a family that chose forgiveness over vengeance. In the end, justice was served, but the memory of Jacob and Matilda Nestor still lives on as a symbol of love stronger than hate.